When you look at a skyline in any major city today, it is incredibly easy to just see the finished product. Like
Yeah.
you look up and see this sleek, gleaming tower of glass, or you drive through a massive, sprawling airport terminal, and it feels almost inevitable, like it just sprouted out of the ground, fully formed.
Oh, absolutely. We interact entirely with the polish. We walk on the smooth marble floors, we enjoy the perfectly climate-controlled air, and we completely ignore the absolute chaos that had to be wrangled to put it all together.
Right, exactly. And so today, we're doing a deep dive into the invisible scaffolding of our modern world. We're examining the staggering synchronized systems required to keep the builders of these modern monuments alive while they do it.
Yeah, because keeping thousands of people safe in environments that are, frankly, inherently dangerous it's nothing short of a logistical miracle.
It really is. And to understand how that actually happens, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got internal presentation notes and site reports detailing a massive initiative during India's National Safety Week.
Specifically, we're looking at the March 2026 programs executed by a major subcontractor named Blue Star Limited.
Right. And our mission here is to uncover how an abstract corporate concept, like a safety policy, is actually operationalized. Like, how does a massive binder full of rules get transformed into the daily life-saving habits of workers across these wildly diverse, high-stakes infrastructure projects?
Because that transformation from paper to practice is easily the single hardest part of any industrial project.
Right, a binder doesn't save a life.
Exactly. A
Hmm.
comprehensive safety manual sitting in a site office cannot stop a worker 50 stories up in the air from making a fatal misstep.
Mhm.
If the worker isn't wearing their harness correctly, the manual is completely useless. The corporate policy has to become an individual reflex.
Which I imagine the logistics of creating that reflex are just a total nightmare. Looking at the sources, they detail an immense breadth to Blue Star Limited's program. They were celebrating this National Safety Week across radically different environments all over India.
Oh, yeah. The variety of the sites mentioned in these internal reports really illustrates the sheer scale of the educational challenge.
Yeah, because building a data center has to be an entirely different safety universe than like laying power grids in the desert, right?
Exactly. We aren't looking at a company building 10 identical apartment blocks.
Yeah.
If you're safety coordinator for a major electromechanical contractor,
Mm.
you are dealing with entirely different realities, hazard profiles, and, physical environments at each and every location.
Just the contrast in the site names alone paints that picture. I mean, you have the STT Noida Data Center, a DLF commercial site, and a VR mall. Then over in Uttar Pradesh, there's the massive Jewar Airport.
Mm-hmm.
In Gurugram, you've got the Apollo Hospital. And then out in the state of Rajasthan, you have the PGCIL sites in Bikaner and Fatehgarh.
Yeah, let's break down the physical realities of those locations because they're so different.
Hmm.
Take the STT Noida Data Center. STT operates these massive hyperscale data facilities.
Mm.
Constructing a highly technical environment like that involves massive electrical loads, incredibly delicate cooling systems, specialized raised flooring. So the hazards there are often invisible.
Invisible? Like what?
Well, like the risk of a high voltage arc flash in a tight corridor, or the dangers related to just the sheer density of the heavy infrastructure being installed in a highly enclosed space.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. So contrast that with the Jewar Airport in Uttar Pradesh. That is a massive transit hub where the scale is horizontal and just
Right,
vast.
completely different ballgame.
Yeah. Instead of invisible electrical dangers and tight corridors, you have heavy machinery moving across huge distances. You're dealing with deep excavations, blind spots on massive earth-moving equipment, and just the logistical nightmare of coordinating thousands of moving parts across a sprawling footprint.
The danger there is mechanical, it's heavy, and it's loud.
Yeah.
And then you move to the Apollo Hospital in Gurugram, which introduces entirely different standards for clean zones and the complex routing of highly pressurized medical gases.
Right, oxygen lines and all that.
Exactly. Or look at the PGCIL sites in Rajasthan. PGCIL stands for the Power Grid Corporation of India Limited. Out in Bikaner and Fatehgarh, workers are laying out massive electrical transmission infrastructure.
Which means they're out in the elements.
Very much so, often in punishing desert conditions. So you're dealing with extreme weather, dehydration risks, and the construction of towering high-voltage structures.
It's just wild. And the internal reports note that the celebration of this safety program spanned all 7 weeks.
Which is huge.
It is a timeline that long costs the subcontractor real money and massive amounts of man hours. It tells me that a single Friday afternoon seminar simply doesn't work when you're trying to overwrite human instinct across that many different hazard profiles.
No, it doesn't. A 7-week campaign is an attempt to force a deeply ingrained cultural shift. Establishing a baseline of behavior requires repetition.
Right.
If you just hand out a pamphlet, compliance spikes for maybe a day and then drops right back to the baseline as soon as the project falls behind schedule.
But getting workers to actually buy in is the real hurdle, isn't it? Like, it's one thing for the corporate office to mandate a 7-week safety presentation.
Oh, for sure.
It's another thing entirely to get a worker at a bustling retail hub like the VR mall and a worker laying out power grid infrastructure at the PGCIL site to take this messaging seriously.
Right, because their days look nothing alike.
Exactly. Given how radically different their daily tasks are, you can't just rely on customized technical manuals to unite them.
No, you can't. You have to rely on shared human psychology and ritual. And the sources actually zero in on a very specific case study that demonstrates this. The internal notes from an event on March 4th, 2026, at the A.B. Maury site in Pilibhit, Uttar Pradesh.
Ah, okay. And this specific event aligned with India's broader annual National Safety Week observance in early March, right?
Yep, exactly. The stated objective in the reports was to promote safety awareness and encourage safe working practices among all staff and workers. And to do that, they leaned heavily into ceremony.
Ceremony? Like what kind of ceremony?
Well, the program began with an official opening ceremony focusing on the history and importance of workplace safety.
Interesting.
Yeah, formality serves a very specific psychological function. Creating a clear boundary, like an opening ceremony, signals to the brain that normal, everyday operations are paused. It elevates the importance of the information about to be delivered.
It's not just another Tuesday toolbox talk.
Exactly. But the truly critical psychological lever they pulled during this ceremony was the next step, which was the safety oath.
Yeah, the sources state that all workers and staff participated in this safety oath, pledging to follow safety rules and maintain a safe working environment.
Which is fascinating when you think about it.
It is. Because if I just sign a safety compliance form, it feels like an administrative task between me and the boss. I can easily ignore it when I'm under time crunch.
Right, it's just paperwork.
But if I say an oath out loud, standing shoulder to shoulder with the guys I work with every day, it becomes a social contract.
The underlying mechanics of a public pledge are profound. Reading a manual is a solitary act, but vocalizing a commitment in front of your peers leverages social accountability.
You're putting yourself on the line.
You are publicly tying your personal reputation to a standard of behavior. It embeds safe practices into the actual culture of the site, rather than just imposing them as a top-down mandate from management.
It's like a sports team huddle. It shifts the concept of safety into a lateral promise. It's no longer just a rule you might be tempted to break to save 5 minutes on a weld.
Exactly.
You're making a promise to the peers standing right next to you, basically saying, I am not going to do something reckless that could get you hurt, and I expect the same from you. You're building a shared identity around survival.
And that shared identity is far more powerful in a high-stress environment than the fear of being written up by a supervisor. Social cohesion and the desire not to let your team down are incredibly strong motivators.
That makes a lot of sense. But establishing that psychological commitment with an oath is really only half the battle. I mean, an oath won't stop you from hitting the ground if you don't actually know how to correctly clip your carabiner.
Right, gravity doesn't care about your promises.
Exactly. That brings us to the physical reality of the job site. The March 4th event at Pilibhit transitioned from speeches to highly specific, practical training modules.
Yeah, the sources highlight a special safety demonstration by a group called Udyogi. They're a major manufacturer and provider of industrial safety gear in India.
Oh, okay.
And the focus of their demonstration was entirely on providing practical knowledge about safety equipment and its correct usage.
Because the gap between a company purchasing state-of-the-art safety gear and the workers actually knowing how to deploy it correctly is exactly where accidents happen.
100%.
You can have the best harness in the world sitting in a supply closet, but if the worker doesn't understand the physics of how it operates, it's just heavy fabric.
Tactile learning is non-negotiable here. The internal notes specifically contrast two environmental hazards they chose to highlight in these training sessions.
Okay, what were they?
First, the confined space demonstration, helping workers understand the hazards and proper procedures when working in tight, enclosed areas.
And they directly contrasted that with the work at height training, right?
Yep. That session focused on safety protocols, proper precautions, equipment usage, and risk prevention methods for when workers are elevated.
Now, the sources do mention demonstrations from others related to safety training programs throughout the week, but heights and confined spaces were clearly the primary focus.
Well, those two modules represent the absolute extremes of spatial danger in construction. Let's look at the mechanisms behind why they require such intense specific training.
Okay.
Working at height offers vast, limitless exposure. A sudden gust of wind or a momentary loss of balance means immediate catastrophic danger. The psychology of working at height involves managing vertigo and, trusting your tether.
But the physical training goes far beyond just learning how to tie off. Like when you're working at height, a harness isn't just a belt, it's a dynamic system.
Right, it has to be.
It's designed to distribute massive kinetic energy across the strongest parts of your body if you fall.
And workers have to be trained on the realities of suspension trauma.
Wait, suspension trauma, what is that?
So if you fall and your harness catches you, you are now suspended in midair. The straps of the harness put immense pressure on your leg veins, restricting blood flow back to your heart.
Oh, man.
Yeah, blood begins to pool in your legs. Without specific training on how to deploy trauma straps to stand up in your harness while awaiting rescue, a worker can lose consciousness and suffer fatal complications within minutes just from hanging there.
Wow, that is terrifying. And then on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you have confined spaces. The restrictive claustrophobic environments like utility trenches at the Jewar Airport or ventilation shafts at the Apollo Hospital.
And confined spaces carry dangers that are largely invisible, which makes them incredibly deceptive.
Invisible dangers.
Yeah, we're talking about the physics of gas density. Heavier than air toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide or even just carbon dioxide can settle and pool at the bottom of a trench.
Ah, I see.
A worker climbs down. The oxygen is displaced, and they lose consciousness before they even realize they're suffocating.
Not to mention the inability to escape quickly if a fire breaks out, or just the sheer panic that can set in when you're squeezed into a dark, restrictive area.
Exactly. Training for that involves rigorous lockout-tagout procedures, constant atmospheric monitoring, and highly coordinated rescue plans.
Because the instinct to just rush in and save a collapsed coworker usually results in 2 fatalities instead of 1.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
That happens entirely too often. Which brings us back to the reality of the worker on an average Tuesday. Imagine a worker suspended 5 stories in the air on the side of the VR mall or squeezed into a tiny, dark utility trench.
Right.
They have to execute highly skilled labor-like precision welding, complex electrical routing, and they have to do it perfectly.
And while they're doing that, they're also carrying a massive cognitive load. I mean, they have to actively remember the Udiogi equipment training. They have to monitor their harness tension, check their carabiners, or monitor the air quality alarm in the trench.
That's a lot to juggle.
Balancing the immense pressure from management to build fast with the absolute necessity to build safe. It seems mathematically impossible for a human brain over a 10-hour shift.
Well, that cognitive load is the core tension of the entire construction industry. Human brains operate on 2 distinct levels: active, deliberate thought, and automatic subconscious processing.
Okay.
If safety protocols require active, deep cognitive effort every single time a worker moves, the worker will eventually make a mistake. The brain simply cannot hold focus on complex technical labor and complex safety checklists simultaneously for 10 hours a day without fatiguing.
Yeah, the brain would just short circuit. You drop the welding torch or forget to clip the lanyard.
Exactly. The goal of the 7-week timeline, the practical Udiogi demonstrations, and the repeated physical drills is to move safety from active working memory into automatic muscle memory.
Oh, I get it. So it's like driving a car.
Precisely. When you drill the work at height protocols enough times, inspecting your D-ring and clipping in your safety line becomes as automatic as putting on your seatbelt when you get in a car.
Right. You don't actively calculate the physics of a high-speed collision every time you buckle up. Your hands just do the motion while your brain thinks about the route you're driving.
You reduce the cognitive load by making the safety measures second nature. That frees up the brain power they need to actually focus on building the intricate cooling systems of the data center or laying the high voltage lines.
And that shift to muscle memory only happens through rigorous hands-on repetition, reinforced by the cultural peer pressure of the safety oath we discussed earlier.
It is a massive, coordinated psychological operation just to keep human beings from succumbing to the natural hazards of building massive infrastructure.
Which brings us to how this intense week of physical training and mental commitment actually wrapped up at the Pilipit site, connecting that massive corporate scale back to the individual human element.
Yeah, the ending of the event is quite telling.
The internal notes detail the final highlight from the March 4th program, the closing ceremony. To conclude the event, the organizers distributed sweets to all the participants as a token of appreciation for their involvement.
Which is great. In Indian culture, distributing sweets marks the successful and auspicious completion of an important event. It's a real moment of community.
It's a beautiful cultural touch, but looking at it through the lens of corporate infrastructure, it also serves a very pragmatic purpose.
Oh, definitely.
Massive firms have to humanize these rigid procedures. You have this intense environment focused on extreme danger, toxic gases, suspension trauma, and industrial accidents.
Yeah.
If safety feels entirely like a draconian, punitive mandate from executives in a boardroom, compliance drops, resentment builds, and accidents happen.
The distribution of sweets reinforces that lateral promise we talked about. Sharing food solidifies the bond between the workers and the management.
It's a tangible way for the organizers to communicate that they value the workers' lives and their attention.
Right. It acts as a necessary tool for maintaining morale, ensuring that when the safety week ends, the culture remains intact.
So unpacking these internal notes from Blue Star Limited really reveals that achieving safety on massive infrastructure projects is a living, breathing system.
It really is.
It requires nationwide coordination over weeks at a time across wildly different hazard profiles, from the invisible electrical loads of a data center to the sprawling heavy machinery of an airport.
It relies heavily on psychological rituals, like the opening ceremonies and public oaths, to create social contracts and peer accountability.
And it demands rigorous, highly practical, tactile training for terrifying physical extremes. They have to train for the claustrophobia and toxic gas risks of confined spaces, and the suspension trauma and vertigo of working at heights, all working together to reduce cognitive load and make survival a reflex.
It's an incredible undertaking.
To you listening right now, the next time you walk through the automatic sliding doors of a pristine new hospital, or you board a flight at a massive gleaming new airport terminal, take just a second to think about the invisible scaffolding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about the dizzying heights and the suffocatingly confined spaces that someone had to safely navigate, clipping in, checking their gear, relying on the oath they made to their team just to make your seamless experience possible.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've just explored how massive industries must design highly structured, multi-week programs, complete with public oaths and intense practical demonstrations on the physics of falling and suffocating, just to remind people to protect their own lives while they work. If it requires that much orchestrated, expensive corporate effort to keep us from walking off a ledge or breathing in toxic air, what does that reveal about human nature's inherent, almost dangerous tendency to normalize extreme risk the moment we get comfortable in our routines?